Every day I pass the wall memorial here on the way to the studio when I'm in the car, and you can see the clouds, or if it's gray or whatever, and I'm just like thankful, man. It really is, for me, it's a real thoughtful place. It's one of those places. In Berlin, there's a bunch of them, because of all the history, but that one, they got the pictures of all the people that died trying to cross it, but you're just crossing the death strip, and I'm like, boy, I got it easy, I guess. There's just a war a couple blocks over.
I've been there probably 5 or 6 times. And the one thing that really struck me, and trust me, I understand why this is the case, but it seems like Berliners specifically have made a concerted effort to not only like remember that history, but it's really everywhere you look, and it can be galling at times. So there's the wall, and there are the bricks that run down the road, but then there's also just sort of walking down some random street in Berlin and looking down and seeing the little placards.
There's that. There's like 20 millimeter pock marks all over my street. The ball bearings all in the brick buildings. The train station bridge right around the corner. It's just, the whole place is amazing. And you look at some of the old buildings and you're like, Jesus, they're never going to make a building like that. The ones that lived, because every single rooftop was blown out. Now they're building penthouses on every single building in the whole place, but every single roof in this whole place was wasted. You know what I mean? I'm not all big on the wars, but one interesting factoid is the last year, there were 300 days of bombings, and it wasn't one plane. It was like hundreds. They just let them have it, like right up until the very end. Yeah. So it always makes me think about other people going through the same thing, especially in Ukraine. And it's very topical, but in the last years, it's been a nonstop for some decades of this stuff, but it's really.
So I'm in New York, and I'm from the Bay Area originally, and obviously not as long of a kind of a Western history that we have here, but also certainly this is the case in San Francisco, but probably even more so in New York, that just nothing sticks around. There's that sort of, and I think it might be apocryphal, but there's that idea of your body regenerating every one of its cells, once every like 7 years or something, and this idea that you're a different person. And to me, that's kind of what New York feels like.
Well, Berlin is kind of the model for Brooklyn and the Lower East Side and Chicago and all those places, when they used to have 10,000 people on a block in the Lower East Side. And it's just crazy. Yeah, there used to be 14 people living in each one of these houses. There was, all those immigrants from Germany. There was crazy when all the farm people moved to the cities. There was 6 million people living in Berlin in 1900. So now it's 3.5 million. Bananas. But yeah, all this stuff. I reflect a lot. I've got a son, and he's 9 now. I mean, this year it's more sex, birds and bees. Next year they let him have it with German history. And he's so sweet, he's just so sweet. It's just going to kill him. And I'm hoping it just flattens all those like bully little smart ass shits in his class, with their attitude. I
was in Cologne, Germany. This was probably like close to 10 years ago at this point, but walking down the street and I see somebody I recognize. It's Art Spiegelman, the cartoonist.
Sure. Mouse.
Yeah. And I had interviewed him a few times in the past. So, we sort of I'm like, hey, this is funny meeting you here in downtown Cologne. And he invited me to this presentation that he was doing that night. And one of the things he was showing off was, after the Charlie Hebdo thing, Ahmadinejad had run a contest basically for like Holocaust denial cartoons. And Art Spiegelman, being the very kind of tongue-in-cheek, ironic guy he entered it. He's showing these like jokey Holocaust comics on a screen. And I'm sitting there. I'm like the one American in this crowd full of Germans, and they're laughing at him. Like, this is kind of a surreal experience, because I just assumed that everybody was really solemn about this sort of thing, that, that they had that history sort of pounded into them, but they're so removed.
There are and there aren't, it's like anywhere. It's like in Iceland, there one third of the population are like these magical elf creative people. And then 1/3 of the population are like, this is so great. We love it all. We want to make more of them.
So you've got the Bjorks over here, and then...
Yeah. Well, Bjork's in the elf category, right? But then there's 1/3 of the population that just love it. They're so proud of it, right? And then there's 1/3 of the population that are like these Swiss uptight people that are just like, oh, be serious, Like, we don't grow pineapples here. Be very serious. You have to, this is hard. So it's crazy. And there's divisions here. There's a 20 something % easily that are just like, fuck all this stuff. And there's, a large percentage of population that believe they've come very hard and that they have responsibilities. Like, they've come a long way in confronting things and going towards helping people. And then there's a large, like, that square population too, that German serious trains run on time shit, but there's a lot of weird things. One of my friends was like 27 and he's in a great band, and they came to tour America and they pulled him aside. It's a question for Homeland Security question for 2 hours. He said, was your grandfather a Nazi? And it's like, dude, I'm 27 fucking years old. Fuck off. I wasn't even born. My mom literally wasn't born. But it was crazy. It's crazy, we live in a crazy world, but about whatever, I like that. I like living here. It's safe. I can be a ghost, nobody bugs me. My kid's safe. And I do a lot of reflecting. I might as well be in the middle of a forest. I'm completely invisible. And I love that. I've got my house and my studio is another house in another place.
What does it mean to be a ghost or be invisible? And how is that different from your life in San Francisco? Well,
San Francisco, they've wrecked it. When you throw all that kind of money, they absolutely destroyed it. People walking down the street, the hedge fund just slapped them 20 million for their startup or whatever. And they're like, oh, that's a great mechanic. I'll buy that up. Or, it was a couple of years ago and I read in the SF Weekly or something that the fire chief said, they're like, here's the last, since 1906, the record number of houses that burnt down were 35. In the last year, we had 150, 175, and 225 houses burned down. Landlords literally burning down the building because they could go, okay, I can't legally kick these people out. I'll just burn down this building because I can just build one flat of 3 flats and just cash in on these idiots with their money. And I'll instantly have 10 million, 20 million, $30 million. But they're like, we can't even believe it. How much, like in the Mission and all these places, And that whole culture, the hippies, they were part of the gentrification of the Upper Haight because those people had all moved out. Grandma was dead from the 1906 era and all that stuff. And that was just cheap rent. And they were getting the black people out of the Upper Haight. And then it was the Lower Haight. And then they totaled the Fillmore district and all that stuff to build the freeways through all that stuff. And Hunters Point, they stopped having the military stuff in the 40s. And by the time those people that owned the dock workers, they'd owned their houses, and they had their pensions, but there's no jobs for anybody. And then it's like, get it to where it's like New York, and I've lived there too. Not everybody has a trust fund. A lot of those people are selling their ass. You try and go around walking up to girls and asking them if they want to go on dates. That's not what they're there. They don't got some trust fund that allows them to have $6,000 a month, pay rent on a flat. But anyway, and you're not making that in retail, so, but the thing is like, even when I sort of was part of gentrifying the Lower Haight and all that stuff, I guess it was still like a mixed neighborhood and a nice place, kind of, for some people. It was multicultural and just okay.
You're the tip of the spear, unfortunately.
Always, every place I've ever lived, even in East Side Berlin, every single place I've ever lived, and that's why my rents are so low everywhere. But, I was paying $225 for a room in the Lower Haight. That flat is $13,900 now where I lived. So it's like just insane.
There's that sort of very like pragmatic concern of not being able to afford it. But I mean, like culturally, did you feel like you were being pushed out as well?
See, I split and went to the Hollywood Hills as the .com. All my friends, I was involved using computers and I could have done any of that crap. My friend Travis he used to be in my band, did Obscura Media, which is the projectors on all the sides of the building that everybody used, and the 3D modeling for that, and I was working for Not Human, who does, recombinant media and all this crazy installations. And I've done, all the Oculus performances with all my friends. I just don't care about that. I don't care for the culture, at all. I don't need the money. So, and I've always been that way. I grew up in Newport Beach, California. I mean, not too many people can buy a house where my family helped found the town. I've always just been like, screw all this, I'm a simple person, you know what I mean? And I prefer it that way.
San Francisco's a tough one for me because, I'm from Fremont originally. So I'm from, the very, very suburban outside of San Francisco. So it is always this place I'll romanticize. But, there's a certain point.
I still have my best friend has a place on Alcatraz in Berkeley, Oakland. And I love it there, It's basically my place too, but America got so wacky, like I knew a lot of people that, this isn't some Alex Jones shit, growing up with Mormons and stuff. And they were just telling me like, oh, the world's going to go this way and this is the way it is. And they were painting a picture, to me when I was growing up, as a teenager about all this shit that was going to happen in the future. Right. On top of the fact they store food for the tribulation. But, they were just painting all these pictures for me. And I'll be damned if I didn't see it all coming, like miles away. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, wait, here's like the actor with the head of the CIA as the vice president. Oh, he's the president. Oh, here's his son. Here's this guy. You know what I mean? And once it got to Obama, I was like, I know people. I grew up in Southern California. So I was like, this is rigged. This is weird. And I know exactly what they're doing. They're showing that we can, that's what the hope thing was about, that we could do it this way. But then Trump comes in afterwards and it's just like, come on now. It's like so obvious. It's like A team, B team. The minute that guy showed up, they trot out Kissinger around the world. They're like, oh, you let him back in because, this is like, well, we tried everything else.
He's like the elder statesman now.
Because we're looking at World War III. And the minute Biden got back in, we're right back to the A team. They pushed right back ahead with all this confrontational stuff, which I'm glad I'm not the president. These are not easy times, any of this stuff. But anyways, without hurting anybody's feelings, America's so bananas and dysfunctional. I've been informed my whole life, and I never imagined I would see people this kind of foolishness and just outrageous behavior, like just bringing guns to protest because you dislike somebody. I mean, I understand Malcolm X and I understand the Black Panthers and what they were doing. It's like in Portland, it was like a couple weeks ago, another African-American got beat to death or whatever, shot and killed in Minneapolis, Twin Cities or whatever. And then all of a sudden they have protests and the Antifa guys are showing up. And then the guy shows up with a gun and starts shooting ladies in Pioneer Square. And then one of those guys pulls out a gun and just kills him. And I'm just like, this is insane because back in the 60s, all those guys would just get on a bus like the Freedom Riders and go, this is unacceptable and outrageous. And they would show up like Montgomery, Alabama, people from Brooklyn and everywhere. But now it's like bananas, right? It's exactly the opposite. You got Proud Boys and everybody else driving across the country, and you got Antifa and everybody else. And I'm a simple person, man. I would just want people to be happy and it's just like a minimum of decorum is required in society, right?
I had to ask, and then we can get off this sort of Alex Jones tip, as you put it before. But
I'm not being a conspiracy. I'm just saying I prefer.
So I'm saying that tongue in cheek.
I prefer living here. I lived in Manhattan on Houston and A, and I said this sucks, and my rent was $250. Evidently, I owned the apartment for 27 years because my best friend's brother was in the CIA. $250 for Houston and A 2-bedroom, nice 6'4". And I was just like, screw this. I'm going to move to Europe. This is
talking about seeing those things coming, and this idea that it's being orchestrated. I guess what is
not orchestrated, but it's just foolish to think that everything is just like, well, let's see what happens.
The end game is more discord.
My friends that work in any kind of intelligence always said, well, who do you want to win? So that's the thing, is that it's a win game. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not random. It is a win game. It isn't a let's see what China does or whatever, or what happens in this, that, or the other, But for me, I'm an artist. I really am an artist. I don't have to prove it. I've been doing it a long time. And so for me, I like progressive politics, real progressive politics. And I like, a beautiful thing about me living in Germany, right? And let me preface this, right? When I brought up that other stuff about the States, it's broken my heart because all my teachers, I was in MGM, it's called Mentally Gifted Minors. And my teachers, so I was born in 1967, were practically crying, addressing us and saying, overpopulation, pollution, wars, you will have to save this world. You guys are the future. Practically crying, and to see like all the progress that can be unzipped. It doesn't matter if there's a Paris Accord, right? The next guy comes and then you don't have it. And all that stuff just, it was heartbreaking. So now I can just focus on my art because it's beyond my control. But what I want to say about the thing about Germany is I can't vote here, but in the Marshall Plan and stuff, they took what was wrong with American legislative form of government, right? And what the shortcomings of Parliament in the UK, and they made an improvement on it. So people have to form coalitions, and I can't vote, but I feel like many of the things that I would like to see in society, they get pushed forward. Like I feel like I don't get it all, but I feel like childcare, whatever it could be, right? That people are looking out for it, that my voice is being spoken for, which is a beautiful feeling instead of all this like us against them.
The first thing that struck me the first time I was in Germany, which was Berlin, because we have these sort of very kind of American ideas of what it is to be over there. And a lot of those are based on a war that happened 70 years ago. But what was just how, with the possible exception, I think of maybe Turkish people, but how open the society tends to be for like diasporic people, for people of different races. To me, that was a wake up call of just like, oh yeah, no, America is still deeply racist in ways that we don't recognize.
And that's why I brought up Obama, is because you look at all that progress and stuff, and then how could it flip the opposite way so quickly? Could it really? No, it couldn't.
But that stuff bubbled up real fast when a black guy was president. Like all that anger, all that stuff came right to the front.
Well, I wish some good could come from that kind of stuff. But what's really weird is the hard lessons and the confrontational stuff. That some of these countries that have had these wars and stuff, Germany, Vietnam, you see the kind of progress spiritually that they make. Like Vietnamese don't hate American. And that is like one of the most beautiful things ever because they were wasted, they were abused. So for me, it isn't about looking down on my country, my homeland, right? It's about how beautiful that those people could respond to that. They're not, you know what I mean? That some vets can go over there and like have that peace or whatever it is, right? And find that when they do their soul searching or whatever. And I just hoping when I come back on this trip that here's what I want to say. Okay. Every time when you're away, it's so easy to form these opinions because the negative news travels a lot, and you think, what a bunch of idiots, what a bunch of just fucking baboons or whatever. Right. But then you get on the ground and you're there and you realize there's so many good people, and you have to do that. And I have to do that when I travel around America. I get to see it.
It's one of those things though, right? It's like, I don't know, confirmation bias is the right word, but you're right. Obviously like bad news sells and moves faster. And then that's true here. Certainly like I'm in the States, but we hear all the bad news, but also when you're touring around, I assume that a lot of the interactions you have with people who are coming out to the band. So there's a bit of a selection bias happening there.
Well, I think we have a lot of good fans, but I meet a lot of people that work at the venues and I sit down and I talk, and what I know is in every state there's great people. You see what I'm saying? Just regular people. So it's not the worst of the worst that I find outrageous, that keeps me far away at arm's length.
There are a lot of assholes here, but there are probably a lot of assholes there too at the end of the day.
Well, there is, but what I want to tell you is I've lived a lot of places, and guess what? It ain't number one there. I've been a lot of places, and my lady can walk down the street at night in a big city. I just don't see the same kind of things. But there are weird people everywhere, you know? They'll find somebody in a suitcase floating down the river or something. I mean, there's psycho people everywhere. But it's just, there's a lot less of them.
Not to get super sidetracked, there was a story, there was
this whole thing has been nothing about my group. We were totally sidetracked. It's great.
It's only top of mind because I just read the story, but Kathleen Hanna, her voice coach was this tiny 80-year-old woman living in New York, just randomly, not for money, not for anything else, just shoved from behind and died with, I think she was like Debbie Harry's voice coach, and like just,
it's like that guy that they just cut. I even like tweeted the president, that guy that was shooting homeless people. I was so outraged, man. I just like, you know what I mean? It just like the kind of violence and anger.
Literally somebody killing people who have not done anything to anyone, who have only just been shit on their entire lives.
But it's also just the opposite of what I feel about helping the helpless. It's just so anti-Christian or anything, anti any spirituality of anything. It's just, it's this kind of dark void. You know, it's black as it gets. I was so happy when they caught
him.
Yeah, somebody did the right thing and grasped him.
Growing up in Fremont, for whatever reason, there is, or at least was, a big Mormon population there as well. And I feel like, you know, a lot of my best friends growing up were Mormon, and I think they tend to get a bad rap because they're just like, I don't know, at least in like my very limited experiences with them, just very kind people, and people who like tend to really follow a lot of those preachings in ways that a lot of other people who are purportedly Christian don't.
Secret Service and CIA seem to trust them. Secret Mormon handshakes.
At least all the ones I interacted with were just really good-hearted people.
Yeah, I'm friends with tons of people, you know, in Utah. I'm a brother. So, and even Mitt Romney, you know, I was making so much fun of him, but a couple times, you know, he stepped up to the plate at what I consider to be American values, you know, are what I think that people should aspire to. I think a couple of times in the last years, he really did some things that I respect. Because you can have, of course, I am conservative, basically, but, you know, not necessarily politically, you know, like, but in many ways I am, you know, so.
How so?
I'm just your regular cowboy surfer, outlaw acid freak, you know, but I'm really tolerant. You know what? I'm really tolerant. I don't care how Netflix wants to portray Superman, you know, like whatever anybody wants to say. I'm personally disappointed that people can't discuss it, but not discuss it for the reason to infuriate one side or the other, meaning to cancel people or to get up people's noses about it. You see what I'm saying? About with transgender issues or whatever. But having spent a lot of time in Sweden, I do know that when you go to an airport, you walk into the bathroom with everybody else, and then there's a stall. And that's the intelligent way to deal with things. Everybody's by themselves. It doesn't matter if you're a furry. It's like, do your business, you know, and go, which that's kind of the good way to go. You know, I basically want people to be happy within reason. There are too many guns, though, and I love guns.
The bathroom thing specifically, I would say, is possibly the most manufactured outrage thing. Talk about just completely making up a boogeyman.
My point was I would just hope that people would be understanding of each other. So that isn't one mob rules over the other.
I was going to say something more on the matter, and then I realized, like, maybe we're not the two people who, like, everyone needs to be hearing necessarily waxing about, you know, gender issues. I don't know that we necessarily have sort of the perspective necessary to really.
My mom was gay.
Okay, well, that's it. That's a start.
About San Francisco, I used to deliver all free meals to all the people with carpal sarcoma and go into all the nastiest homeless hotels, you know, down on 6th Street, because nobody else would dare do it, even though they love to volunteer.
Shit, yeah, you were in San Francisco right at the height of all that, weren't you?
Yeah. And I stood up with it. My aunt was like, "Oh my God, Anton, you're going to get AIDS and die." And I said, "Jeannie, if what you believe is true, we're all dead. So I'm going to die helping people." Because you think I'm going to get it from breathing air, then you're dead too, you know? But anyways, Any last thoughts about music?
Or first thoughts about music?
Ask me a good question.
Well, shit, that's a lot of pressure, man. I got a really good and loaded one. Are you good for a loaded one?
Whatever.
Are you a hard person to be in a band with?
Well, I'm sure I have been, but see, I've always known what I'm doing. And I firmly believe that having ideas takes precedence of having no ideas. See, I'm not interested in arguing with somebody who has a theory about democracy, but no ideas and no leadership skills, because it's great and we can all get along great. You know, let's have some team building exercises and do nothing, have no records. And I dealt with a lot of people who I taught a lot of my friends how to play, and people that had it's always something, right? There's like serious faults in some people, right? That are fatal flaws. It could be from their life or whatever. And a lot of people, like, for instance, a lot of people drink or self-medicate because of emotional PSTD or, emotional trauma, or because of mental illness or whatever. So you get into a group of a couple people like that, and it's going to come out, Is kind of micromanaging your fatal flaw? Well, I get very uncomfortable with people because, first of all, I don't like the fact. You see, I can play every instrument, and I think orchestrally. So it's cute to say all children are exceptional. We're all the same, but it's not true. Every child is not a Mozart. Sure, yeah, certainly not everyone is good at everything. I mean, everybody's not a Mozart. See, but I think like Mozart, and you can't really understand that. See, so when I just get a hint and it's there, I don't even know. I'm like, what's that song? Oh, it's me. I better figure out how to play it. That kind of fire. When everybody's trying to learn about life or accomplish something, it deprives other people of that learning process sometimes, and that's a real painful thing, because not everybody's just in it for the excitement of just playing something that sounds good or something. They have their own aspirations, see? And then how people work that out. Whether it's in a relationship, two people having sex, it's the same thing, right? It's like, well, you know what I mean? It's like, how do people, over a long period of time, how do people interact like that, right? It's like, are you just trying to get off? Or you care about me? Am I here? It's all this kind of stuff. I suspect you get this a lot, because I think for a lot of people, the movie was kind of, maybe their first exposure to you. And from everyone I've heard who was involved, sort of very, very edited. But obviously when somebody watches something like that, they have certain impressions of how people are, personally viewing them on screen. And every interview I've heard with you subsequently, this interview, you're very pleasant. And I wonder, like, did that kind of ruin people's perception of you? Were you like that to some degree? And have you mellowed out as you've gotten older? The thing is William Morris Agency was a giant agency, and they offered me to be a part of the film with about 10 bands in LA. And they arranged a meeting with the filmmakers. And I said, I'm taking over this movie. And they giggled at me. I said, because all your bands are going to break up and nobody cares already. And they're like, how'd you know 6 of them already have? And I'm like, okay. So tell me and then I'm on film. Tell me you've never heard of the Dandy Warhol. This is a better idea. I said, this is a better idea, because they're going to do whatever it takes. And I'm going to say no. I promise you, I'll say no to every single thing. And that's black and white. See, because they're going to say yes to everything and I'm going to say no. But I'm going to give you the access to the full bidding war, because they were opening up. So I said, we'll use my spy cameras and go to my meetings and they'll do the same. But then they couldn't show everything because we were being courted with cocaine and hookers and every single thing. So they couldn't get releases from everybody. So at the end of 7 years, all they had was oh shit, we need to wrap this up. I'm pregnant with a kid. So let's just make some story. Because they tried to sell to VH1. It tested the highest ever for MTV for a reality TV show, and they couldn't show it. So at the end of the day, I don't care. That's why I don't talk about it much. At the end of the day, I don't care, because I know the truth. See, else I would just write a book. I was just sort of getting at that I think that, like, you seem to have mellowed out a bit, as, you've got a family now. Obviously, you're sort of, you're living in this house, and you're not as maybe in people's faces as you might have been, 20, 30 years ago. Well, I've always been, see, like, oh yeah, you're in people's faces. Look how many records. I did 6 albums in 1 year. Whose face was I in? I was in a studio. That's fair. You don't even know, man. I was dealing, the reason I want to, one more time, are you looking at this video? This is all, you think I'm a junkie loser? This is all my gear that I've had since forever. This guitar, I wrote all the songs in Digs and was playing this guitar. My sitar's in the other room. I got all of this stuff. I've got the microphones that I made Strung Out in Heaven in. I've got every single thing. Not only that, it's all here in Europe.
No, I was not calling you a junkie.
I'm not the junkie loser. I'm not the guy who's sleeping on couches. See what I'm saying? That nobody knows about that's not doing anything.
You were driven.
See, but listen, but when forgive yourself for watching a film when you see somebody freaking out that's being instigated. Many times it was the guy with the long hair driving everybody crazy, and then you just see somebody yelling. It's just edited. I don't talk in the movie very much. I'm not talking hardly at all. I just tell people, man, I just was telling record companies, I'm like, dude, I'm the actual letter writer. You're the postman. Make the delivery. Give me a recording studio. Give me what I want or fuck off. But the thing about it is you might look and go, oh, he's an idiot. But every one of my peers sold all their publishing. They make zero money off Spotify. They have nothing. Even if they had a down payment on the house, it's gone unless they're a real estate agent. I have everything. I own all the music. I license those songs every day. I don't have to. My kid's mom, my older son in college, they don't have to. You know what I mean?
You got results.
I didn't fuck up. None of those people that criticize me even have a job in the business. The business doesn't exist. My business still exists. So, I mean, it's all perspective.
It still exists and you're still here, which is a lot more than a lot of people can say, a lot of your contemporaries.
Well, but I get judged harshly because little Steven's garage, he's going to go on and on about a bazillion groups that never even don't have as many streams as me of Spotify or as many records or sold as many records or anything. And he'll never give me the time of day.
Got to wait another 30 years for that wave of nostalgia.
No, he can kiss my ass because I didn't play by the rules. But I know those guys love me. I know Bruce and certainly Nils likes me. He follows me on Twitter, and his wife and him, and they say hi. I know Neil loves those. Neil and the real guys, Dylan, those guys love me. But some of these other people are just like you didn't play by the rules, so you get no respect. That's fine by me,
When you spend your entire career playing by the rules and you see someone who makes it without doing that, there's going to be some resentment there.
But also the rules were rigged and they ran the industry to the ground. So I was right. They were wrong.